The year is 2001, and fantasy is dominating the box office with Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, and Shrek. This is also the year when regular people became globetrotters in the Amazing Race. Apple launched their first iPod, and the great-great-great-nephew of Herman Melville wanted to take you to the South Side. But we're not here to ride all night and ride all day. Some may come and some may stay, because today we're counting down Electronic Gaming Monthly's best reviewed games of 2001. Love and Darkness and my sidearm. I think it's safe to say that Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 was one of the most anticipated sequels of 2001. Electronic Gaming Monthly had not only given the previous installment a perfect 10 out of 10, but they also named it the 17th best game of all time. That's a lot for this third game to live up to, so it probably won't come as a surprise to learn that Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 didn't leave quite as big of an impact as its predecessor. Sure, it managed to make the top 10 list with an average of 9.3, but when we look at EGM's scores, it's clear that the series peaked with number 2. Che does a good job of summing up the problems with this sequel. You may have to convince yourself a little harder if you anticipate Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 to be as revolutionary as its older siblings. Unlike the manuals of Pro Skater 2, there isn't just one key feature bogarting center stage. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 is the sum of all of its excellent new parts. They also complained that Part 3 breaks very little new ground and drops a half a point off the score. Gary gave the lowest score and raved about the online play and interactive levels. Causing earthquakes to create new trick lines and knocking guys into vats of water are a hoot! While not as groundbreaking as Part 2, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 still ollies onto the top 10 list with an impressive average of 9.3 out of 10. By 2001, the writing was on the wall for the Nintendo 64. There weren't a lot of big new games left to go before the GameCube's release, and reviews had dwindled from 86 in 1999 to 50 in 2000, and now only 23 in 2001. The good news for Nintendo loyalists is that the quirky role-playing game Paper Mario managed to zoom past Banjo-Tooie and Conker's Bad Fur Day to be the only 64-bit game to crack Electronic Gaming Monthly's best reviewed games of 2001. Despite the selection of N64 games drying up, Paper Mario managed to win the Game of the Month prize in EGM's March 2001 issue. The game's combination of stylized, flat-as-paper characters and 3D worlds is really the perfect way to deliver the high-tech look RPG fans have grown accustomed to, while retaining the cartoony qualities Mario fans have grown to love. Mark offers this one piece of advice: ignore the name on the box. This is Mario RPG 2, and it lives up to the first game both in content and quality. He was blown away by the badges, secrets, optional side quests, mini-games, and overall presentation. With everybody falling in love with both the look and the gameplay, Paper Mario manages to average a paper-thin 9.3 out of 10. Three years after begging its readers to buy Panzer Dragoon Saga as quickly as possible, Electronic Gaming Monthly is back to do the exact same thing for another little-played Sega cult classic, Skies of Arcadia. People still didn't listen, but at least this time the Dreamcast RPG found a second life on the GameCube. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, because EGM has a lot to say about this pirate-themed adventure game. Not since Panzer Dragoon Saga has Sega hosted such an engaging RPG on one of its platforms, starts Jonathan. Combining some of the best features from old and new game influences, Skies of Arcadia even outshines some of Square's best efforts at times. Milkman calls it easily the best looking RPG yet, and raved about the unique battle system, tight-knit group of characters, wonderful storyline, great special effects, lots of secrets to find, an epic, melodramatic quest, and the best airborne battles since, well, you know who. After a year dominated by Square games, it's great to see unique role-playing games from both Sega and Nintendo make their way onto the best reviewed list. Skies of Arcadia flies high with an average score of 9.3 out of 10. After getting sacked by NFL 2K1 last year, Madden returns to the top 10 with a chip on his shoulder. With multiple football games competing for the same space and forcing each other to innovate, this truly was a great time to be a fan of the gridiron. I like the way that Dean puts it at the start of his review. Rather than a simple roster upgrade, Tiburon actually did something that improves Madden in useful ways. They made it faster. Madden 2002 is chock full of amazement, explains Dan Leahy. I can't begin to describe the number of replays that leave me slack-jawed due to the astounding AI. He was also impressed by the endless list of options and features, something you didn't see in other NFL games at the time. Craig had a slightly less convincing reason to give the game high marks. I've always wanted a football game that lets me choose the stripes on my player's socks, and thanks to Madden, my dreams have come true. Hell, I can even color them flamin' pink! Yeah, he also praised the improved gameplay, graphics, animation, and speed, making it the 7th best reviewed game of 2001 with an average of 9.3 out of 10. Now, if you've been following our look at Electronic Gaming Monthly's worst reviewed series, then you might have noticed that the magazine has started to forego the usual multi-person review crew on a lot of the truly bad games. But it's not just the stinkers that get the single-person review, but also titles released on last-generation hardware. You know, like the original PlayStation. If we're being honest, that usually means that one of the editors gives a middling score to a so-so game. But there was a game in 2001 that managed to break through, and that game was Colin McRae Rally 2.0. Jeez, I wasn't ready for this one, starts John with a solo review. The original Colin McRae Rally was a pretty fantastic game and certainly relieved itself upon the competition from a great height. But nothing prepared me for how much better the sequel would turn out to be. Yeah, I think I'm just gonna skip past the obvious pissing joke and point out that John concludes that Colin McRae 2 may well be one of the finest racers on the PlayStation. Look, I'm not gonna lie, I kinda wish I knew where some of the other editors stood on this game, but in the end, the classic Codemasters Racer scores a 9.5 out of 10. The Legend of Zelda, Oracle of Seasons, and Oracle of Ages was not only the last hurrah for 8-bit Link, but also the final gasp of life for the Game Boy Color. With Nintendo moving all their portable resources over to the just-released Game Boy Advance, many looked at these Capcom-developed adventures as a swan song to the beloved handheld. For their part, EGM reviewed Seasons and Ages in the same issue, giving both identical scores. Everybody agreed that this was a perfect way to say goodbye to the Game Boy. 2 new awesome Zelda games in 1 month? Hallelujah, shouts Mark in his Seasons review. Old school Zelda fans will love the familiar gameplay and all the other references to the earlier games. Jonathan R. loved both of them, but preferred Ages because of the thought-provoking puzzles and the Super NES Zelda-esque world designs. Chris agreed and said that it's amazing when one Zelda game makes it out every 2 years. So it's a dang miracle when 2 old-school Zelda games were released on the same day. He also loved the ring system, seeds, mini-games, and time travel, ultimately giving it a 10. With all 3 editors giving high marks across the board, both Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons averaged the same score of 9.5 out of 10. You know, one thing that I love about 2001 is how pretty much every system had something to celebrate. For the first time ever, one of EGM's top 10 lists features six different game consoles, including the original PlayStation, PlayStation 2, Game Boy, Dreamcast, Nintendo 64, and now the Game Boy Advance. Of the 19 launch games reviewed by EGM, it was Castlevania Circle of the Moon that topped the list, and by quite a large margin. The editors were desperate to play another adventure game in the vein of Symphony of the Night, and Circle of the Moon did not disappoint. Mark puts it perfectly. As far as I'm concerned, this is the best reason to own a Game Boy Advance so far. Graphically, it's a bit dark and hard to see, but with a good light source, you can fully appreciate the crisp and very detailed visuals. Jonathan called it a masterpiece of 2D gaming. Konami's taken the best parts of Symphony of the Night and Dracula X, merged them onto the Game Boy, and added a metric ton of new abilities via a card collection system. Che also loved the game, going as far as to give it a perfect 10 and concluding that it's probably the best handheld title, outside of Tetris, that I've played. To be fair, there were complaints about a weak story and repetitive action, but Castlevania Circle of the Moon averages a symphonic 9.5 out of 10. We've seen plenty of sequels make their way onto Electronic Gaming Monthly's best reviewed lists, but it's rare to talk about the same game 2 years in a row. Well, that's exactly what happened when EGM reviewed the Dreamcast port of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 just 2 months after giving the PlayStation version a perfect 10. Perhaps that explains why they gave it an equally high score. This was almost a full year before they would get their hands on Part 3, so the shine of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 hadn't rubbed off yet, and being able to play a much better looking version of the game was impossible to resist. Dean was tasked with writing the only review and calling it a no-brainer buy. Beyond the stuff that you'd expect to be different, like more prose, parks, and music, Neversoft has cooked up some truly innovative features for Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. By balancing on 2 wheels between tricks, the manual feature lets you link them up like a madman. So, in other words, EGM basically just repeated what they said 2 issues ago. They quickly touch on the Dreamcast's improved draw distance and the more detailed levels, but admit that it's basically the same. But that's good enough. Considering the quick turnaround between versions, I have to agree. This Dreamcast port manages to earn a score of 10 out of 10. Making it the second year in a row that Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 has been named the second best reviewed game of the year. Yeah, I doubt we'll ever see that again. By 2001, Gran Turismo had proven to not only be a formidable franchise for Sony, but a racing game that changed the genre forever. Gone were the days when a publisher could release a single-player racer with just a few tracks. Because a game like Gran Turismo 3 A-Spec came with 19 courses, nearly 200 cars, and more customization than you'll ever need. This was Sony showing what the PlayStation 2 could do. And those EGM editors ate it up. With no Soul Calibur or Metal Gear Solid games to worry about, Gran Turismo finally earned its spot at the top of the best reviewed list. Greg confesses in his review that A-Spec had taken over his entire life. I think my race count is well over 400 in simulation mode right now, and I still come back for more. He loved the graphics, the variety, and learning the ins and outs of driving every car. Jonathan agreed, saying that Gran Turismo 3 will exceed most any expectations you could have. It's the most realistic racing experience around, and that includes all the frustration of having a weak car or getting nudged by aggressive competitors. It's GT3's style. Che also loved Gran Turismo 3, but was quick to note that his 10 does not mean that it's perfect. He complained that the AI was weak and would force you off the road in pursuit of that pre-scripted race line. That minor complaint wasn't enough to drop the score even half a point, which means that with an average of 10 out of 10, Gran Turismo 3 A-Spec is Electronic Gaming Monthly's best reviewed game of 2001. Hey, thanks for watching this episode of Electronic Gaming Monthly's Best and Worst. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we'll be looking at the worst reviewed games of 2001 on Friday. Now, here's the question I have for you. What is your favorite game from 2001? It of course doesn't have to be one of the games we covered here. In fact, I suspect it won't be. I mean, there were 2 different console launches not even reflected in this top 10 list. If If I had to guess, I bet we're gonna see at least one person say Halo in the comments. But hey, maybe you'll surprise me with a bunch of GameCube launch titles. I know some of you out there are into Luigi's Mansion. In any case, we'll be back on Friday with our worst of list, followed by 2002 next week. In the meantime, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.